So welcome to Paralegal 246. We are going to be going over modules 3 and 4 today. And I've got some slides linked for you in the module. So let me get these open. Let's see. Can you guys see the slides? Or, well, I guess not yet. It's a big black screen. It's loading. Okay. Can you guys see the slides? Like, everybody? Are they showing?
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. Okay, so here we go. And I believe the first slide is going to be Rick, Professor Manzano, kind of giving you guys some updates on the fact pattern and what was up in the discussion board. So,
okay. What I posted in module 3 is a researched fact pattern. This is the just the fact pattern that we're going to use all semester. I just put it up for you now so that you'd start to get a feel of why we're doing certain little bits and pieces of research. Because probably after about, see, we're in week 4 right now, technically. After about week 6, we're going to actually start doing our research project, which will be the final project for the semester. And Quinn versus Easy Mart is the basic fact pattern. It wasn't really necessary for the discussion this week because all I asked you to do was a typical entry-level paralegal function, which would be, I have these citations that I know are not correct. Would you please properly cite these constitutional provisions? Because one of the things that we find is very important is that in order to give you credibility, you need to use proper format for a lot of things. And part of that is your citation style, that you actually follow the rules of citation. So if you look at the way I set the module up for you, I had the reading materials told you how you actually cite to different constitutional provisions. So that's why I threw up a couple of different ones. And I sent out the announcement on Friday that actually had the proper citation for each one, because it depends on whether it's a amendment or if you're citing to sections or multiple sections or things of that nature. Does anybody have any questions on either the discussion that we've been doing on citation styles or what we're doing with the fact pattern?
Yeah, Professor Manzano. So in your discussion, what you put in the discussion post, you put it down and then you said just to reference that, what you told, the example you showed us back to our original post. So does that mean you want us to go back and just wipe out all our definitions and everything we put just to put the citations themselves?
Well, if the instructions were to give me the right citations.
Okay.
I didn't ask for analysis or anything. No, you don't wipe anything out because, number one, you can't, because I don't give you that privilege. As I said, just reply to your original post. That goes for any discussion in any of my classes. You know, people say, well, what happens if I, now that I've been discussing with everybody, I found out I was going up the wrong road. How do I put up, the right answer? You just reply to yourself, because I look at your total participation when I'm grading these, and the more you're active, the higher your score is going to be. It's not like I got to be careful how I say this. It's not whether or not you put the right answer down or not. It's what you do with it. No, so that means you don't just put up a bunch of BS for your first post and then go and correct it. That doesn't work either. I can tell when you're legitimately trying and doing. So when we actually use the term, what is your citation? That's saying what is, when you look at the that's right, you can't see I'm trying to scroll the screen here and it's not working. It's Christmas.
You can share if you want.
No, we'll be out this in a minute.
And I just pulled up, because someone asked what was the fact pattern. So I pulled up the discussion board where it has the fact pattern we'll be playing with right there. but then I think it's also linked right in a page in the course.
That,
So
that's a, I guess,
later,
yeah,
My
that's
question with that is like, well, what do you mean by fact pattern? Is that like a term for a thing that I should know? Like I read this, I just don't know what a fact pattern in general is.
it's just kind of a
when
like
you
it's like a teaching thing. Like it's the hypothetical we're gonna play with for the semester. So as we are not at that point yet, but pretty soon we're gonna be having you guys do research projects, like actual do research, and it's all going to be related to kind of solving this Quinn versus Easy Mart case. So it'll be a little more real world based, and it'll kind of all have a way to link together. So when you're in research classes and you're learning, lots of times they'll give you a fact pattern. It's just a client scenario. Like if you were in real life, it'd be like, well, this is the client's situation. And so we need to go find some research to see what the answer is, you know? So
Okay.
yeah,
All
so
right.
it's just like our hypothetical that we're going to play with so that we can be a little more in depth instead of like, you know, starting from scratch every week and like, I don't know, having a super cheesy thing. So
Yeah,
Okay, thank you.
the plan here is we're going to build on this, and Professor Harmon said for 248 he will take our fact pattern and where we end off and add to it what you do, because we'll be doing basic research and basic writing while he'll be teaching you the advanced writing techniques. So keep all of your research and data, because you may end up doing it again in his class. And if you've already done it, you know, lawyers don't want you to do things twice. If you already have it, you just make sure it's up to date, which we'll teach you in a later module, and things of that nature. So,
Sure.
yes.
I'm just curious. I know some people were using the Blue Book citation and some people are using the California style manual. Does it matter which one we use?
Kristen?
yes, it does matter. So if you are, and this is one of like the annoying things, you know, again, you guys, we're California, we're special. That's maybe like the number one thing you should know. We're Californians, we're special. So we have our own method of citation. And I don't know if this is coming up later, so but let me just put this out there right now. The main citation manual is called the Blue Book, and it is quite literally, and I don't have one handy, a blue cover. It's a blue book. The Blue Book is actually made or created by the editors of the law review at like Harvard, Yale, I'm not sure if Stanford, but it's law students who essentially write the Blue Book and come up with the rules that then, and I think I'm saying this right. I mean, this is like from years ago. And then that is what all the courts, all the systems have adopted as their style manual. So if some of you are familiar with, is it MLA? I think we got that question last time. MLA, APA, or, you know, AP, whatever, all the, you know, AP. Well, and so in law, we have our own style guide, and it is the Blue Book everywhere else. Oops. If you are in California, we have our own style guide, and it is known as the California Style Manual, or kind of the AKA the Yellow Book, because it is a yellow cover. And I think we'll check the links we might have. I think there's like the state provides like free PDF links to it. And I don't know, I've been fighting. I got to figure out where mine went, but at any rate, but it is an amazing resource. It's just a little book. You can probably get them on Amazon for 10, 12 bucks. It's paperback, and it'll give you some information about the type of source, but then it tells you how to cite the source and how to properly cite it. You know, does the page number go first? Does it go second? Is there a comma? Is there a period? It also tells you how to abbreviate things. You know, Professor Manzano and I don't decide how to abbreviate things. The style guides tell you how. So the easy breakdown, if you're in federal court, you're most likely using Blue Book. Obviously, if you're in California state court, you're using Yellow Book. If you're in some other state court, you're probably using Blue Book unless they have their own, you know, Idaho manual or something. Sometimes if you're in, and this is where like bonus round, I'd have to even check. If you're in federal court in the state of California, then you might be using the Yellow Book. And sometimes it could also be each judge would have their own preference, but I'd have to check. But generally speaking, yellow is California only because it's California's manual,
Mhm.
and blue book. So maybe I'll double check while we're going. And Chris, no, you don't have to know this before. We'll be kind of peppering it in as we go.
As, for example, the
Mhm.
link to citing the Constitution is a page out of the California manual. Section where it talks about the constitutions. The title of the page in your module is Citing the Constitution. That is a page out of the California manual. Because it's, if you notice at the bottom of the page, it says all notations are to the California style manual. That's the yellow book.
Are you fucking serious?
People are asking, when do you use the blue book? It's going
If
to
everybody
really,
would mute themselves unless you're talking, because we're getting some background noise, I'd appreciate it, please.
yeah, let me see if I can see who it is. But yeah, so I've just pulled up a little resource, and maybe I will post this in the class, like from Pepperdine Law School. I mean, I'm just looking for things, but it's really going to be the court rules and the jurisdiction rules. So obviously, if you are in the California state court system, Superior, California Court of Appeals, California Supreme, you're using the yellow book, the California yellow book. If you are in federal court, you're almost exclusively using the blue book. My only one little question is if you are in like federal court in the Central District of California, then you might be allowed to use yellow or blue. So I will have to look it up really quickly for you. But for sure, whatever you use, it needs to be standard. Like if you're in one filing, don't go yellow book and then blue book and then yellow book and then blue book, because they're slightly different. Like the period goes here, or it's abbreviated this way, or I mean, it's maddening, I guess, is for sure. It's maddening. And then make sure if you're using some of those like Lexis or Westlaw, like there's some integrated programs where it'll help you clean up your citations when you get further into this. And you'll want to make sure that you've selected the right yellow book for California. I think for most of you, California yellow book would be the correct thing. And I'll try to add this little Pepperdine thing in there for you guys. How about that? So yay. I don't know if that helps anybody, but you don't have to know all this yet. That's partly what you're going to be learning, is how to properly cite. And remember, citation, the whole purpose of this, and sorry we don't have this on slides, the purpose of citing and having a proper citation is so that someone else can go pull the research and read exactly what you read. They can go pull the case, they can pull the statute, they can pull the Constitution, you know, so it's like, even though we trust you, it's the idea of, hey, look, I have nothing to hide. You can go look this up yourself, and you can look at the exact page that I'm looking at. You can see the exact quote I've pulled. And so by having a uniform method, then anybody can find it. It's also a little bit because each case, each statute has, you know, I always explain it, it's a uniform, it's a unique identifier, like a barcode, you know, at the grocery store, or you know, an ID card number. It's a unique identifier that only identifies one piece of legal research. Oops, hold on, let me get that for you. So when you use that citation and you plug it into an internet, you know, search engine, or you go to your local law library, you will be able to find that exact piece of legal research and you can read it yourself. So that's why you want to make sure that your citations are correct, so that a judge or opposing counsel or the attorneys, anyone you're working with, can go and kind of follow your steps right along and go, yep, you know, we may, you know, maybe we're on opposing sides, but I can see the exact cases they've cited to. And so everyone's, you know, putting their research out there, a judge, anybody could go read it. So that's the purpose of having citations. And by having it be uniform, right, then we can all speak the same language. But unfortunately, there's not one language for the whole country, right? We have at least 2 different citation methods. I don't want to scare you, but there's a green book out there. There's another citation method, but don't worry about that one. So in the legal research community, this stuff is hotly debated. And I know that you all know I'm super nerdy, but like the past few weeks, Blue Book came out with a change to like one little thing, and it sent like the legal research world into a frenzy. But at any rate, so the nice thing is the California style manual is a little more it's a little more stable maybe
Better,
because
yeah.
it's not controlled by the two. And if you think about the Blue Book's very elite, it's Harvard and Yale law review kind of controlling that, which, it's not legal writing professionals. It's very interesting. I mean, there's a lot of in the weeds there, but that's more than you wanted to know about the
So,
Blue Book and the
Kristen,
Yellow
can
Book.
you go to
Uh-huh.
module 1 on your screen?
Yeah, let me go here. Okay. Oh, sorry. Let me do this. And I'll add this one little article I just found too as like an extra resource. Okay, here we
And I'll
go.
tell you where to add it when you're ready.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Okay. I mean, when you are, yeah.
Yeah.
In module 1, we discussed citations. Click on Cite Your Source. I just think this would be a good place to put your article.
No, perfect.
Which has, maybe I already have it in here. Or no. See, it says the California Style Manual.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yep. There you go.
It's
Perfect.
right there, the whole thing. And then what I've been doing is taking bits and pieces of the California Style Manual that apply. Because I found it, number one, to be drier than Dune.
Yeah.
It's very dry, so it can be taken in little bits and pieces. So as we go through each one of the through statutes, through the constitutions, through the case law, I've pulled the appropriate page for your reading in that module. But that's, if you want to see the whole thing, go to the page Cite Your Source, and it has that in there.
I'm adding this one item because I don't want to mess up, because I know we're building some other stuff, Rick. So
Okay.
I'm just adding it because it may not be worth keeping in the giant class, but and we've got to check all the accessibility stuff. But at any rate, so there's another little Blue Book versus Yellow Book. But if you look at your court rules, right, it would tell you, the PDF. So Liz is saying, is that for Cite Your Source, Liz? The PDF isn't working for you? Let's see.
Yeah, for the California Style Manual. I could get to the online version, but I couldn't search through it. Yeah.
Oh, Rick. Okay, so we'll fix that.
Okay.
Yeah. Like it's got the little guy. And you guys, you can, I mean, obviously if we can post the free version for you, that'll save you, but just know this book is probably 10, maybe even less than $10 on Amazon, I bet, because it doesn't change much. It's been around a long time. It's paperback, and it's not super big.
This is the free version here. The next version is owned by Westlaw.
Mm-hmm.
That's why I didn't post it, because
Yeah.
I'd have to pay for it.
Yeah.
And there's not that much. I think it's pretty close.
And this book is so underrated for usefulness. And to be honest, like, I think that's why I don't have it, because my husband and I maybe have like stolen each other's because it's so good. So when you go through it, right, not only does it have the citation, but what a lot of people don't realize, and hopefully I'm not making you seasick, is it actually tells you some information about the courts and things like this. It's kind of hidden. So we'll probably get more into this later. I'm trying to think where I can find you a good spot. But at any rate, just know it's worth reading through some of the information here, because it'll kind of remind you about, right, here you go, you guys. Constitutional statutory citations are generally given priority over cases. Like if you can't remember some of that, U.S. Supreme Court precedes other citations. California, when you're in California, comes first. I mean, so just there's interesting little tidbits and different things. Like if I had mine, I'd have it flagged. But at any rate,
that's in today's reading materials.
Yeah, so this is worth looking at, when you got, even just flipping through. I know it's not as exciting as Dune, but but we'll fix that link. So thank you, Liz, for telling us that link was broken. So. And what else? I don't know. Where are we? We've gone down a rabbit hole, a good rabbit hole.
This is Doris. I have a question about provision 3, the citation.
Say it again. Which one?
Provision 3. I have a question about it. Okay. I don't know if you can pull that up. The question that I have is there were 2 sections, a section 1 and a section 2, but the citation, the provision, the correct provision citation that was presented says that you have to do, it said sections 1 through 35. So if it, I don't understand why you put 1 through 35 if you only have sections 1 and 2, or whatever it was, 1 and 32.
Was it from the assignment here from the discussion board?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Well, provision 1 has nothing to do with the citation. That's telling you that's the first one I want you to talk about. Provision number 2 talks about the 14th Amendment.
Uh-huh.
And provision number 3, if you look down on it, is sections 1 through 32.
2. But there were only, okay, so in the...
No, it's sections 1 through 32.
Okay.
And so that's what you're giving me a citation for. You're right there.
Even though it says section 1 and 2 in below.
I didn't give you all 32
Oh,
sections.
yeah.
Okay, gotcha. And now I understand.
That's what I'm saying.
Okay.
I see what, yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
What's the difference? It's so that you can understand you use 2 section marks to say multiple sections.
Okay.
If you,
Ooh.
oh, and by the way,
Should we talk about how to make those section marks on your keyboard?
yeah, I just thought of that because I have it written down in,
Do you want to share your
based on
screen, Rick?
my computer.
I
Yeah,
wrote mine down.
Do you want to share your screen and show people, or should I stop
No,
sharing
there's
this?
nothing
Okay.
to, it'll just appear as section. It's a keyboard. You actually, in order to get that little section mark, you hit the Alt key and 21. When you release everything, you get a section mark. So if you want 2 section marks, you hit Alt 21 release, Alt 21 release. That's the way I found my particular computer to work.
Okay, so I'm going to share my screen really quick because I've got just a blank Word document. So this is where, some of you, I feel like it's more of like our younger students, but, I'd recommend not making more advanced documents in Google Docs. You really want to do them in full Word because there's so much more functionality. But so, if you go to like insert, there's different ways, but you're doing a symbol, right? So I don't even know. See, now I'm not going to do good, but sometimes you have to like key it from the beginning. Like you have to find the symbol and then key it as, because you can key it as a special key, like if you're using it all the time. So I don't know, and I don't
You
even
can go to insert and then go all the way to the right. We're under share.
Oh, symbols.
The left, yep, symbols,
You
and
guys,
then go
thank
more
you.
symbols.
Yeah, sorry. And then symbols. I'm like, I haven't set it up on, let me do more so I don't see it there. So you find it, it looks kind of looks like the dollar sign, right? But
It's up near the top. You got to scroll all the way to the top.
oh yeah, oops, there we go. I was at the bottom.
I always forget that when that happens to me.
But I need the
Can't
Greeks.
find it. Where'd it go?
Oh, there it is.
There it is. Yeah.
Okay, so you first may have to select the symbol, and then what you can do is, so mine, it already has a built-in shortcut of Alt plus 0167, like that's gonna work. So when I have done usually in the past is I have made my own shortcut, right? So I change it. So I've done like to make that section, I'll do Control Shift S or something, and then assign, right? And then close. And so now if I do whatever you set it up, Control Shift S, Control Shift S.
That's why I said mine I made Alt 21.
Yeah.
Because Control and Shift is too hard for me to do.
Yeah, or whatever. Yeah. So you guys can make it what you like, but especially if you're in the law, knowing how to do some of those symbol. I mean, I think that's the only one you really need is the.
Yeah.
I think I picked the right one, right? That's the right
Yes.
one, the double S.
It
So
looks good to me.
okay, this is what you really need to know, people. How to make the keyboard shortcut for the Greek symbol. I don't even know what it's the Greek symbol for, but there you go. But that's fun, huh? So you can do that with everything. So if you end up in a weird thing using weird symbols, if you change your name to the artist formerly known as Prince and you need to like insert a symbol in those contracts, because you can also, right, you can upload like a custom thing and do that whole thing. So that
I
happens.
see what Simona said. I've been doing that for a long time. She said she just wrote out the word section.
Okay.
Yeah. I used to actually have on one of my oldest computers actually had a section key on it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and they don't do that anymore.
So
So that's
Simona,
why I was lost when I went to the new computer. I said my section key disappeared.
And you can, but at some point you'll have to use the symbol. So just to review, like if you're in a Word document, and sometimes your versions of Word might be a little different, go to the insert menu and then just look somewhere on the insert menu. Mine's all the way on the side will be symbol. Click on symbol, and you're going to have to usually click on more, right? Because there's not enough symbols displayed. And then thanks to Kevin, scroll that bad boy all the way to the top, and then slowly till you get, I don't know if it's Greek. I don't exactly know what this S thing is. Maybe it's like a Greek S. I don't know. And you can kind of see they somewhat follow. I don't know.
You already passed it up.
Oh, did I pass it? Oops.
Yeah.
This is a great demonstration. This is like the plane's going to crash and we're all going to die.
It takes
like,
a while to find it the first time. You get it in, do your shortcut key. And I wrote my shortcut key down on the base of my computer.
Post-it note.
Basic
Love them.
Latin. I want the basic Latin. Maybe that. Oh yeah. So you know what? On the subset, make sure you're in basic Latin. Who knew? And then under basic Latin, there it is.
Well, it tells you it's not Greek. It's Latin.
It's basic Latin, according to Word. So I believe it. But here's like, if you're ever wondering how people get like the little copyright symbol or some of those things. But anyway, so go to basic Latin, and as you scroll down, there it is. I don't even know what that is, an S, a double S. And then you can insert it there, but more likely if you're gonna be using it a lot, you can, it comes with a shortcut key, but you can also assign it your own. So if you're using it a lot, and that may be with any symbols, like some of you, if you're in different types of law, if you're using, I don't know if you're in patent law or financial where you're using other currencies, but just know they've got a whole bunch of different options.
If you were in intellectual property, you probably use the copy, which you've got down here under recently used copyright and your trademark and your
trademark. So if you ever wonder how people make like cool tweets where they're like trademark, you know, that's probably how they did it. So like mom of the year, trademark, you know, teacher of the year, trademark. Oh my gosh. Yeah. That's what we need. Teacher, I'm in class. Thank you. Okay, thank you. Anyway, so hopefully did that help, Simona? Because I'm sure you're not the only person that is finding this a little bit confusing. So, but yeah, if you write the word section, that's probably fine for now, but you do want to kind of start to, you know, level up those word skills to figure out how to make some of the symbols. So awesome. Yeah. I'm going to start signing everything with like teacher of the year, trademark. You're right. Okay. So I don't know where we are, but this is good, you guys. We're getting nitty gritty in here. I love it.
Slide number 2.
Oh, okay. Let me go back. I'm like, where are we? I know it's only 6:36 and we're on slide number 2. This is terrible. Be afraid. No, I'm just kidding. Okay.
But the best part is we said, is there a question? And we talked for 20 minutes. So that's
yeah,
good.
This is great. And things are kind of easy from here. Okay. So let me. Okay, I think you can all see these. So we just got the fact pattern update and then some, which was awesome. So yay. And okay, so let me go to the next one. All right, to you guys. So kind of officially, and I would just say my hair's crazy. Just some of your general information that some of you probably already know. So constitutions, of course, you have the United States Constitution, which is also known as, also called the federal constitution, you know, because I know some of you, you know, have experience from other countries, just different levels. So United States Constitution, sometimes people just call it the Constitution because it's the only one they think of. Federal Constitution, all mean the same thing. It's the founding document, and I didn't write that on these slides. But why the constitutions are important is that they're the founding document for the governance system in this country and then in each state. So that's another way, founding, right? It's the document that literally created the government. So it's kind of a big deal. At any rate, so obviously they're mostly old. You know, the United States Constitution was signed in 1789. So
I think I was 20 or something at the time.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Do not tell Kim Smith that we are making jokes that how old we are. But at any rate, so yes, we were all 20. I love it. So you do get like the old tiny language, you know, that sometimes can be hard to read and understand, you know, 250 years later. So the US Constitution, 1789, also known as the Federal Constitution. People might just call it the Constitution, okay? But then we also have state constitutions. So each state in America will have one, and they often are very closely aligned. They very kind of follow the template of the United States Constitution. And, you know, I'm no California history person, but I learned a little bit in doing the Googles for this. So obviously we have a California Constitution. I forget now if it was like 1839 or 1840, you guys will know. But what was cool was they said it was both written in English and in Spanish. Oh, and it was signed and super cool. And obviously I was reading some state propaganda because they were saying like women had the right to vote and they said no slavery and all this stuff. I'm like, well, isn't that interesting? So at any rate, so you can read more about that. Maybe it was like 1850. If somebody knows, if they've got California history, but at any rate, so depending on what system you're in, right, you would want to know what that law is. So if it's a California state issue, then obviously the California Constitution is very much at play. If it's a United States issue, federal, then obviously the federal Constitution could be weighing in. Often though, I mean, they don't necessarily, you know, affect the day-to-day situation, but you should still know they're out there and whatever. And this actually is a little image of the California Constitution with a little, I don't know, a little drawing there. At any rate. So I should have gone to this next. So why would you research a constitution? Obviously, it's probably going to be a highest priority, like in that research bubble. But even though it's highest priority, there may not be much, you know, it was signed in 1789. Unless there's an amendment on point, you're pretty quickly going to jump into the case law and the statutes that have come later. But you would still want to know, because when you think of, at least on the federal level, where we're very comfortable hearing about it, you know, is it your First Amendment rights that are at issue? That's constitutional. You know, is it the balance of power between the different branches of government? That's the Constitution. So it could be a really big deal. But at the end of the day, you're going to pretty quickly jump into cases and statutes. Okay.
Ms. Robinson?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Just a quick question. I remember, are you recording?
I thought so.
Remember if you hit record.
It says so.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, at the top of mine it says recording.
Okay. I thought I didn't hear it, but I'm old.
We did it so long ago, we don't remember. It was like when we signed the Constitution. It was last week. The other reason you would research a constitution, I mean, it might help you find other things. You know, everything is sort of like a hunting and a pecking. So, you know, something from 1840 or 60 might not be the, you know, the biggest item, but it's just good to know if it's out there. It's good to know if it is a constitutional issue, and it's good to know if it's not. You know what I mean? If it's not something that applies. But at any rate, so it might be something that you're pretty quickly moving on from, unless you're really practicing or working in that area of law where this is up all the time. But okay, so I've put a couple links in the slides for you guys for some extra materials. UCLA library guide, law library has a really nice library guide. So there's a link to that. And then for the US Constitution, Cornell has a really cool thing. I'm gonna click on it. I don't know if this will work. Can you guys see this? Is it working?
Yes.
Okay. So what's cool about this is they've taken the text of the Constitution and they've like split it up into hyperlinks. So, you know, you can see Article 1, Article 2, and then it's going to take you to this. And so you can see, you know, different things. I don't know. So it's just super interesting. You can hunt and peck around and kind of read different things. But I just thought this was cool, a cool research. Okay. So at any rate, but the library guide is also interesting because it's specifically how to do research for constitutional issues. So anyway, just some things if you want to look those up later. Okay. Getting into statutes and legislative items. I'm wading into some shallow water or deep waters, and I need my life jacket on. You know what I mean? Like, so let's just lay some groundwork that you probably already know. Law that is created by the legislative branch is called statutory law or statutes. Okay, so your legislative branch of government, right? Doop, doop, doop. In the 3 branches, they are assigned with creating law. And so when they create law, we call it statutes. And that term statutes will usually is what we used for federal or state legislative branches. Because remember, another thing you're still getting really locked into your brain is we have a similar system at the state and a similar system at the federal level. So we've got a federal constitution and a state constitution. We've got federal legislative branch, state legislative branch. So we've got federal statutes and state statutes. And then what I think is cool is it is still considered a statute when you have law that is created by the city and by the county bodies, legislative bodies, your city councils, your county, I don't know what the county executives or something. But we actually call those ordinances kind of in the common parlance, but they are a type of legislation. Okay, so if you want to go really deep down the rabbit hole, ordinances, city ordinances like no skateboarding here kind of thing, or county ordinances would be thought of as kind of emanating from legislative. Okay, well, just a little term there. Now, for doing research, I guess I've already messed up my slides. This is really the places where, federal statutes are published, okay? And we have 2 official publications and 3 unofficial. Yeah. And does anyone remember what the breakdown between official and unofficial means? You want to chat in or share with us, or maybe who publishes an official publication? Do you guys remember? It's Monday night. We haven't seen you guys in 2 weeks. Do you remember who publishes something official in the legal research world? Judges, pretty close, Liz, pretty close. You could bump it out bigger than that. Anyone else? It's okay. So official is published by the government. So an official publication means it's published by a government entity, as opposed to, let me put that out there. Unofficial is published by a private publisher. So like Westlaw, right? And so you have to pay more for it. So official are published by government, right? Whether federal or state. And so interestingly, California, our official codes, official by the government, they only exist online. I'm sure that was a cost-saving technique done some years ago. So if you want to use the unofficial, that's by the private publishers. And you should also know, as with our other forms of legal research, unofficial is often the preferred book. And it doesn't mean that it's like not good. You know what I mean? This isn't like an unofficial autobiography of someone. The unofficial is actually usually in legal research the preferred thing to use because it gives you all the extras, right? Because you're going to pay more money for the extras. So it doesn't mean that the quality is less than, okay? Because they take everything and then they just add some extra information throughout. So you get 2 official publications and 3 unofficials. Okay, so the official ones for federal statutes, statutes at large, which to be honest, I've never heard of till I dove back into this, and then the United States Code. And probably some of you have seen in citations USC, 17, USC, la, 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 right? And then they're organized by topics. So USC, you've probably seen, right? And the topics are the titles and things like that. The statutes at large are organized chronologically, meaning literally by session, by session, by session. Like everything that was passed, October, I don't know, or like the spring session of 2020 is all organized in one compilation. So those aren't the best ways to research because you would have to know each, like, am I going to the fall session, the spring session? It's not by topic. It's literally just published chronologically, like day by day, whatever was passed. Then we get the United States Code annotated. So now we're into the unofficials and we have 3 choices here. So we have USCA, and if you ever work with statutes, some of you doing immigration law might come across a lot of these, bankruptcy code, things like that. USCA is the code, but with annotations, right? And that's historical notes, cross-references, other cases, very helpful. USCS, United States Code Service. And to be honest, I may have to dig deeper. I'm not even sure what the real difference is between USCA and USCS is. If someone knows, chat in. And then the USCCAN. And this has the key difference here. It doesn't have the annotations, but it has the legislative history. And this isn't on the slides, but legislative history can be very important when a piece of legislation is being challenged and the question becomes one of intent. What did the legislators plan? What did they think this word meant? You know, this was passed 20 years ago and we used that word differently. What did they mean when they passed it? Or even, you know, if you think of some of the things we've seen with Trump currently right now, you know, the Supreme Court has even looked at like, well, what was his intent when he spoke about this publicly or at a rally or at like a news conference? So the intent and legislative history is pulled from those debates and the comments they make when the legislation's being passed. So legislative history can be super important. Oh, Simona, thank you. This is beautiful. She says USCA is from Westlaw, private publisher, and USCS is from Lexis, private publisher. Thank you so much, Simona. You are a genius. And that's why they both have similar things: annotations, historical notes, cross-references. If you want the legislative history, which if you are really in deep on one of these issues, you may actually need, then that would be the USCCAN. So if you ever see those, now you kind of know what you're looking at, right? And why the difference is. But Simona for the win. Awesome. Okay. So that's a lot. It's on the slide. More than you ever wanted to know. Okay, there we go. So here's a little process, which, I mean, again, probably we all know. Maybe we don't. An idea, you know, someone's like, I've got an idea, right? And so they propose a bill, okay? And then, you know, there'll be the debate, whatever. It has to be voted on, passed, and there's a lot of complex process in that rabbit hole, but eventually it has to be passed because we're a bicameral system, bicameral, 2 houses at both the federal and the state, whichever system you're in. So at the federal level, it would have to pass the House of Representatives, and then it would have to be passed by the Senate, so the 2 houses. If it gets passed, then it's signed by your executive, sorry, I spelled that wrong, officer, which is the president. And then it gets published as a slip law. So slip laws are then composed into those statutes at large. And again, that's chronological. So sometimes if you have something that's hot off the presses that your firm or your client wants to challenge, the only thing that's been published might be a slip law, right? You know, there's been a lot of that kind of in the political world that we're in right now, where the minute something gets passed, it's getting challenged, you know, boom, boom, boom. And so slip laws, right, are coming out after each session. And then later at the end of the sessions, and it takes some time, they are then put into the different titles, right, in the different topics and published in codes. So depending on where you are in the process, like most likely things you're going to be using will be in those other options. You would only really be dealing with slip laws if you are like hot off the presses. We're challenging this the minute it got, you know, passed, we're challenging it type of thing. So there's
Can I
that.
insert something here?
Huh?
Can I insert here?
Yes, please.
Remember, if you did your reading for tonight, I actually put back something that my daughters used, and they're adults now. Schoolhouse Rock. I'm just a bill. It's actually, you know, it's intended for K-12, but it actually goes through the history of how something becomes a bill, and it's sort of a cute way to look at it. It was just a little thing at the end I put. It's not quizzed on or anything. But under Read Chapter 2, Legislative History, Take Quiz, on that page at the very bottom is a little short video from the Schoolhouse Rock video series on how a bill becomes a law.
Thanks for posting that. It brought back a lot of memories.
Yeah, when I saw that, I had to put it up.
You guys, we're going to play it. I put it in the slides. Get ready. I'm going to pause the recording because it doesn't like it. No, you're fine. Rick, it was from you. It was from you. So hold on, you guys. Let me pause it. Rick was like, I just meant for you to watch that on your own, not for you to watch it in class. This is genius. Billy. Bill and Billy. Anyway, so there you go. If you're really stuck, just bring that to your law firm. If they're like, how do you do legislative research? Tell them that's how. They'll be super impressed. Okay. So here's, how to find what you need. And this is, if you're not using some of the, I don't know, if you're using paper sources, if you're using the online stuff, it's going to be almost instantaneous. But something to be aware of, the USC, right, is updated every 6 years. And so outside of that cycle, you're going to be dealing with pocket parts. But even what I read said the pocket parts don't come out too much. I don't think we've ever mentioned, I know this, we're mostly thinking internet, but I have a book. I have an actual book here. So what's a pocket part, right? You have a book, right? A front and a back. You open the back of the book, okay? And in the back of the book, there will literally be a little sleeve, like a little folder slip. And then they shove in the pocket what I always kind of said is like old school comic book or like newspaper print. It's like a little, and they slip it back there. So it's an old school way of updating a hardback book, right? You don't want to publish a whole new hardback book. So you make a book with like a little sleeve, a little pocket, and then you slip, like librarians will slip old school things in there. So if you ever do physical research with physical books, you want to make sure that you check the back for the pocket part, because that'll be updated more often than the actual physical book itself. So at any rate, we haven't talked about that. And then the USCA, and Simona, you're genius, thank you so much. And the USCS is updated annually, and perhaps even more than that because it's online. Okay, so that's if you kind of know for sure what you're looking for, which you may or may not know, right? That could be very, I'm sorry, my whole thing is going weird here. So if you really know what you're looking for, if you don't, you might want to use, there's a couple different ways, and I'll see if I can add in some photos to the modules here, but conversion tables. So the conversion tables at the end of the USC, USCA, USCS will give you, if you have the statute at large, it'll then convert it and tell you what the relevant volume set, where it's located there. Where did it end up? Like it was passed as like, Assembly bill or Senate bill or whatever from the, 32nd thousandth Congress, whatever. But what title, where did that actually end up? The conversion table would tell you that. The other one is each of these books and services will have a popular names index. And if you go online, you can find that where you're going to search by the popular name. So now you'd have to kind of know the popular name. But that would be another way. And it will tell you then like what code section it's in, where did it end up, what title. But the subject index is just like an index. It's multi-volumes, right? It's alphabetical. So you could look up, D for defamation. You could look up, slander, libel, whatever. And you're just, and you might have to do a bunch of, well, I'm looking for something about, DUIs. Is it under alcohol or is it under A for automobile? Or is it under, I for intoxication? So you might have to kind of do that kind of hunting and pecking while you try A for automobile, A for alcohol, I for intoxication, maybe even D for drugs, different things, right? As you're kind of looking the word index to see where you can find that stuff. So I don't know, but kind of just playing with it. So that's kind of the federal side. On the California side, and chime in, Rick, or anybody, if you have anything else. Similar process, right? You have the assembly bill, like a law is proposed as either an AB or an SB. So when you kind of follow just our local laws, when you hear them talking about AB this and SB that, right? That means it's telling you if it came out of the like kind of assembly, like the House or the Senate structure. And obviously if it gets passed by both houses, then it gets signed by the executive officer, the governor. And then from there, it gets organized into subject areas, right? And they're subdivided into areas. And then I put, which you guys have other access to as well, but here's our nice California legislative website. So the California law link is where the laws have been organized by titles, right? And subjects, so you would look at that. But it's kind of cool if you really are doing interesting work here on current things, you're actually gonna be looking at more specific bills. I mean, this is pretty in the weeds, but if you're looking at stuff to see like what happened next or whatever. But this is the only official publication we have lives on the internet. Otherwise it's Deering's or Westlaw. Yeah, sorry, Rick.
Um, just because you're starting to talk about it, if you looked ahead for our discussion this week, everybody, this is the page that I'm telling you to go to. Not the Constitution one, Chris, but the one for that's due next week. Citing, yeah, California, that one right there. Yeah. See, they will go to the page you were just on, the legislative website. And you, so that's what I'm saying. If you could, when you're showing the tools, these are the tools that we're talking about in the discussion that you'll be using to try to find. In our case, your supervising attorney needs to know what the statute of limitations is. So that's what she's going to be asking you to try to find whatever information you can on the statute of limitations that might apply to our fact pattern.
I'll give you some tips. I would probably do code because most likely it's already been passed with code and you could put in thing there.
Oh, yeah.
And that could be yeah. So bill is right, something that has maybe not made it all the way yet. So but interesting, hasn't been codified. So now you can see the power that
we're. You knew you wanted to look up Megan's law.
Oh, okay. Let's see here.
Under, I don't know if that would be in the code or under the bill search, you might find it, one of the two.
Oh.
That's just the only one I know by name.
There we go.
Because you hear on the news all the time.
This is the sex offenders? Okay.
Yeah, well, as I said, it's the only one I know by name because it's in the news all the time.
Mike. Anyway, oh, okay. Code search.
Yeah.
There we go. But oops, I had it, you guys. It popped up, but I don't know what happened. Anyway, so yeah, so there you go. So, and then, right, if you look on the like yellow book, PEN, penal, like criminal code. So you could click here. I think, I don't know why it's not showing, but it doesn't like me right now.
Oh.
Anyway, well, whatever. But you would go to that section. There you go. Here. Yeah, I don't know what's going on. How come it doesn't pop up?
Well, where it says go to page 1, hit go and see what happens.
Oh, go.
Where were you?
I don't know. But if you, I guess I could just write it down and go to penal code. So I don't know what's going on. But at any rate, at least you found it, right?
Mm-hmm.
So Megan's Law, go. And then, so you would go to penal code 290.03. So somebody remember that. So click on California penal code. And then as you scroll here, crimes and punishments, 290. Am I making you guys seasick? There we go, sex offenders. This is just lovely. But anyway, 290.03. Yeah, so it'll be, I'm gonna make us seasick. But anyway, so it's down here.
So you would do the same thing if you were looking for statute of limitations. You would probably type in there. And just so you know, I did make sure that I had something that when I did research, I came up with things. So but we'll go over the discussion results next time.
Yeah.
But this,
or you know, I'm almost done, Rick. If you want to do that at the end too.
Yeah.
I think this might be the end here, but oh, Emma's got a good question. Oh, so okay, then Elizabeth just asked, is this due? When is this discussion due? So first post, Elizabeth, is due the 16th, which is that Thursday, Wednesday?
Wednesdays usually, yeah.
So first post is due Wednesday, and then your comment posts are due Sunday night.
And remember, these are due dates, not which is the last time you get full credit for your first post. It doesn't mean you have to wait till the 16th at 11:59 p.m. to post it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but that's a good question. So does that help? First post and closed, and then Emma asked, how long can it take for a bill to become a law? So a long time. But here's the tricky part is, you know, from like, you know, kind of people having an idea, hey, here's something we want to do, to like making it happen. You know, it has to be written. They've got to like propose it, all that kind of stuff. But then there's certain rules that like once it gets proposed, am I using that right word? Proposed. Once it gets proposed, if it's proposed during a session, it has to be passed during that session, or else it kind of dies. And then they have to start over at square one and like re-propose it and re-vote on it at the next session, if that makes sense. So sometimes that's why if you really follow politics, they get really concerned about they're almost to the recess for summer, or they're almost to the fall recess, because it's a fall term and a spring term. And so if they don't finish things during that term, they don't get to hang around and come back to it. They would have to start over at square one of having it be, you know, supported by these committees, and then go to the floor, and then they have to vote, and then the other house has to vote. So that's why if you really follow politics, you'll see sometimes we're keeping it open till midnight so that we can keep the session going, so that everyone has time to vote. You know, because if we don't get this thing voted before we close session, we'll have to start all over again in 3 months, and start all over again with potentially new people, right? Because, you know, different election cycles, and starting all over again at the committees. So you can go down a rabbit hole, and it is really interesting and fascinating to like learn about all those different things. But so technically it might only take 3 or 4 months, right? From when it gets proposed, and then whenever the two houses and then the president signs it. But it might take them a year or two to write it, but they haven't actually submitted it yet, right? All the different, you know, people or think tanks are just kind of creating it, writing it, and then, you know, then they'll bring it to Congress, and kind of the whole thing happens. So I don't know if that helps, Emma, but it's kind of there's a timeline, I guess.
So can anyone propose a bill?
It has to be a member of Congress, right? Of Senate or Congress. So you can have like, you know, interest groups or regular citizens like, hey, we should do this, you know, but you would have to have an author of the bill be either a member of the House and it gets introduced as a House bill, or a member of the Senate and it gets introduced as a Senate bill, you know, or here in the state. So even if you were working, and I think typically the lawmakers actually do work with interest groups and people who are subject matter experts and are helping them write all this stuff, but it still has to be authored, introduced by one of the members of the House. And then you'll get into those things where it's like co-authored, like you'll have like a Republican and a Democrat came together to co-author a bill, you know, so that way co-sponsor is another word they use. So then they can already say, look, it's already has tons of support. Yeah, so, you know, that's why, yeah, so sometimes you'll see that like 10 people co-authored a bill. You know, it's more just, they probably kind of, I mean, maybe somebody wrote it, but they kind of all did it together so that it already has, you know, bipartisan support. Yeah, yeah, truly. So, but it just depends how much you want to like follow politics, kind of the politics side. And then there's a whole bunch that goes into the committees, because each of these bills gets assigned to be reviewed by a committee of the House or a committee of the Senate. And then those committees are very political, because it's like so many Republicans, so many Democrats, and the committee has to approve it, has to be voted by that committee to move out of the committee. And then if it gets voted to move out of the committee, then it goes to the floor of the House or the floor of the Senate, and then you get all the big debate. But so potentially that committee could squash your bill, right? If it, you know, the committee could lock you out and shoot down your bill without even you getting to the big vote. So yeah, there's interesting things. But yeah, so I know we're at an election year, you guys. So yeah, your vote matters, you know, all those things. And even like, you know, representatives and senators and all that kind of stuff, and state lawmakers. So go vote. Okay, let's see.
Thank you for clarifying, Professor.
Hopefully that helps. I'm no political person.
It sounds like a lot of work though.
It takes a lot, but you know, but you can also see it does move faster than a court case. You know, when you think of the timelines, you know, of something working its way up to like the Supreme Court of the United States or the Supreme Court of California, it actually can be much quicker as a bill, you know, if people have support for it. And then I've linked, which maybe Rick has as well, but here in the slides are some library guides. So the Sacramento County Public Law Library is really famous. So I've got like their legislative guide here linked for you. and then kind of they're a general, which we may have linked somewhere else, but a general library legal research guide, but then the link to specifically their legislative history research, which is really in the weeds. But I think this is quite useful, and it's got, you know, other links for you. So if that's something that you're into or you need, there you go. You can play with that. And I think that's all I got, Rick. That's the end for me. Okay. So I'm going to stop the share, or unless you want me to share stuff, tell me and I'll share it. I'll pull it up, Rick.
Why don't you go back to the California Legislative Information webpage?
Okay, let me. Okay.
And sort of act like you're doing a search to find statute of limitations. Sorry, I came up with the one name I remember that was sort of a bad
Do you think
one.
I should just, so here's the question. Do you think I should just do just generic? Should I just do select, leave it select code? Like I'm totally new. Let me just do that. So this is, you know, yeah. So I just did that unless you wanted me to search a specific code, Rick.
No, okay. I'm just sort of giving them the idea of what they do. I wanted to play with it a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
And again, you guys, you got to relax. I'm not here to see who I can eliminate from the program by giving you assignments that are impossible to do. What I'm trying to do is give you some real life research type activities and play with them, get a little frustrated, and then we'll talk about them next week. Yeah, this isn't Dancing with the Stars. Well, I guess I could be the host. I just wouldn't be one of the contestants.
Or The Bachelor. You're all getting roses at the end. Don't worry. No one's getting sent home from the fantasy date.
Yeah.
More like The Voice. I'm just waiting for you to turn your chair.
Oh, there we go. So as you can see, when you hit the broad term statute of limitations, it becomes pretty broad. So what you need to do is then think, okay, let me look at my fact pattern a little bit. What type of case are we looking at? So you might want to qualify your case and think about if we're thinking about you know, that we have freedom of speech issues, we have you know, unfair labor practices, we have you know, the fact that she was called the police and she was threatened, you know, so you might want to think, okay, well, that it sounds like it might be possibly a tort action. So if it's a tort, you know, you might want to look at this statute. If it's something else, there might be a different statute that applies. So first of all, you know, does anybody have a question as to, and I was waiting for the question to pop up, what is a statute of limitations? Everybody knows that because you took Kristen's civil litigation class already, right?
Yes.
Who's in it right now?
Because I don't hear any or see any questions for.
So remember, that's your time to file, right? Like the statute of limitations means you have a window of time to file your lawsuit. How long is the window? How big is it? When does the window close? You know what I mean? When does your coupon expire? So you have to file your lawsuit, you know, in your window of time. So there you go.
Just so you know, statute of limitations is jurisdictional. What that term means is no matter how much the judge thinks your case is the greatest thing in the world, that you were wronged, you're entitled to billions of dollars and everything else, if you do not file your case within that window that Kristen just said, the court no longer has jurisdiction to help you. The only jurisdiction they have is to say goodbye. Okay? So it's very important, at least to me in a law office, the first thing I ever did when a case came in the door was make sure I knew what the current statute of limitations was, and we put it in the calendar, and then we backtracked, you know, 6 months and 9 months before that statute ran with reminders that have filed this case yet. And I can't tell you from the years that I was actively practicing law, where I'd wake up in the middle of the night and I go, "Oh crap! Has it been? It used to be the statute of limitations on a tort was a year. It's not anymore. But it used to be, an auto accident case that you had 1 year from the date of the accident to file your case. And I'd sit there and go, "Oh my God, that case happened a year ago last week. Did we file it?" And I just couldn't remember in my head. I remember one time I even went into the drove down to my office and pulled the file out. I just go, "God, we filed that 6 months ago. We've already done interrogatories and I took a deposition." But in my head, all of a sudden, I'm remembering this stupid case because what do you do if you miss the statute of limitations, Kristen? Who do you call?
Oh, as I tell them, if you miss the SOL, you're pretty SOL. But yeah, yeah. But you're
insurance.
I mean, it's bad. Yeah, I'm like, I think it's malpractice. Like,
that's what I'm saying. Is I say, who do you call? It's not Ghostbusters. Well, unless that's the name of your insurance guy. It's you call your malpractice carrier and go, "Hey, I just blew a statute. You guys, might want to get on this."
Yeah, it's bad juju.
The first, and probably one reason it sticks in my mind so much is the first law firm I worked for. We were an insurance defense firm that handled professional malpractice. We handled engineers, architects, and my worst clients I've ever had in my life, attorneys. And that was one of the biggies. They missed a date to do something, and no matter how hard they tried, there was nothing they could do. It's over. And so that's why it's important. And so the first thing your supervising attorney is asking you to do is, when do we, how long do we have from the time our claim arises? And I'm not going to ask you to go into that nuance because, it's real simple in a personal injury case. What was the date of the accident? Okay. But in this type of case, something that's been ongoing and, when's the actual date when it starts to run? Well, we need to know still generally how much time do we have from when the term I'm looking for when the cause of action accrues, meaning when do I have standing to file my lawsuit? From that date, how long do I have to file it? So that's what I'm asking you guys to look for. Does everybody sort of understand what you're looking for?
And I think a good thing to keep in mind too is you can use, this website. You can also do other, you can do other research. You can do, Google. You can, use other things to take you into the California code. You know what I mean? Like you're still going to get that code citation, but you can use, because yeah, someone's asking, Leanne, I don't know if going here is generally the first place people go to because this is kind of, and in the week, unless you know what you're looking at, like this might be a little strange to start with. But it's good to know what's out there. So you are welcome to use, kind of whatever you want and to get in there. So
you will find that further modules down when we get into online research where we will be giving you your licenses to use LexisNexis, that it's easier. But what I'm trying to do at the beginning is, this is one of the databases that Lexis uses. In fact is, I think Lexis is the official code publisher. It's either Lexis or Westlaw. I think it's Lexis is the official publisher for California codes. And so, yeah. So again, you got to look through and see what type of case are we looking at. There's a whole bunch to look through here. And here's the thing. If you are totally lost when you're doing this, jump into the discussion and say, "Hey, I need help. Can somebody tell me where you're looking?" Find out where, this is a learning process here, okay? We're a team. I want you guys to act as a team. Yeah, because there's a trespass action in there. You should have written that one down real fast as she just went by. So, and again, the grading here is not going to be, did you come up first with the right answer? Were you the first one to post the right answer? No, we're not doing that. It's how much did you actually participate in the discussion? Because it's one of these things, research, in my opinion, is it's one of those things like riding a bicycle. You know, when you first, yeah, I know how to ride the bike, but you keep falling down and all this stuff. And the more you ride the bike, it becomes muscle memory, and research becomes muscle memory. I can tell you to answer that earlier question, my first go-to is I Google things, and you'd be surprised that when I'm doing research for class, not necessarily when I'm doing research for my when I'm acting as a real attorney. But you know, I'll say, God, I know there's a case on such and such, and I'll just start googling some keywords, and I'd say about 80-90% of the time, exactly what I'm looking for comes up, and you can go from there. But that's secondary sources that we talked about that you use to find your primary source. Because of course, if I'm going to be responding to a motion or creating a motion based on the statute of limitations, I need to cite the judge the primary authority, which is going to be one of the California codes, uh, probably the Code of Civil Procedure. So that's sort of our research tool that we're going to get a little hands-on today, and we'll go from there. Any questions?
Hello, Professor. Yeah, I do have a question. So what you're saying here that any type of, it can apply to multiple different kind of like labor and civic or civil. It can apply to different laws, or it just can be only one?
Well, there might be, you have different causes of action. There might be different statutes of limitations based on the causes of actions. So if you're, it would be a whole different research project to answer the question, okay, if I have a 1-year statute of limitations and a 2-year statute of limitations, I'm going to put them together, which one applies? Well, my rule was always, you always take the shortest one so you don't have an argument, okay? You don't want to ever leave anything for interpretation if you can. So I always made sure that I filed everything within the shortest period of time. You know, what happens if I file a complaint? You know, one party files a complaint and the other party has a cause of action that's now lapsed because they filed it on the last day. Can I still file my cause of action? There's some rules on that, and that would be some research we could do too. But what we're looking at here is for you to come up with some hands-on, get a sort of a feel, go through and look at what sections you think might apply, put those up in the discussion, and say why you think it's the one that might apply. How did you find it? I'm asking you, did you have any problem? You know, how did you like the site? Did it work for you? Did you find it somewhere else? You know, put as much into the discussion as you can, because that's what we're trying to do.
Okay, thank you.
Take a breath.
And, you know, don't be afraid to, you know, kind of, Google, toot around, you know, but as you look at, there's a whole bunch in here, you know, so within 10 years, you know, bonds, you know, I mean, there's all 3 years, right? You know, a liability from a statute, you know, taking, detaining, or injuring goods, personal property. Yeah, that's 3 years. So, you know, some of this, you know, as you just kind of go through it, and, you know, you'll see more here. Any rate, within 2 years, a contract that is not in writing, an oral contract, right, is 2 years. So any rate, you'll see. But yeah, so kind of fun. I don't know if this one applies, but there's that, and it's within 1 year. And I like how Rick said that. It's like, get comfortable kind of, you know, hunting and pecking and jumping around and looking at different things. Yeah, Elizabeth, so the discussion board, your assignment, your first post is due by Wednesday the 16th, and then your comment posts are due by the 20th. So anyway, but yeah, you could use Google. I mean, if you have other things you like, you know, whatever, there's other kind of legal search engines that are free out there. You can use those too. So,
and be sure you use proper citation style from the Yellow Book,
which we've linked in there. and help each other out, right? You know, if you're not sure, you got people can chime in and help each other out. So let's see here, Rick. You want me to go back over here?
I just wanted to make sure they understood what our discussion was. If you have questions, it's easier to ask it here than.
So all they're doing, so right now, you guys, you're not analyzing the whole fact pattern. You're just finding out what is the statute of limitations for, and are they discovering, I can't remember, does the fact pattern tell them what our causes of action are, or are they doing their own analysis?
Look at the fact pattern and maybe kick that around a moment with everybody as to, if everybody will take a moment and, or Kristen, if you want to go through it. And
yeah, you want me to, okay, let's see here. So Sarah Quinn used to work at Easy Mart. She's a cashier for 7 years until she hurt her back. After a long series of events, she lost her job. She says the company illegally failed to take care of her through workers' compensation. Easy Mart disputes this, but won't discuss the specifics, okay? Easy Mart is a nationwide chain. It's not union, right? With largest store in California. Ross is a, you know, these are fake towns. You know, it's a suburban town of 25,000, small town. When Easy Mart opened, the mayor did the ribbon cutting, la, la, la. Easy Mart is located in the shopping center.
Paragraph has relevance a little later in our research.
Yeah. Oh, yes, you're right. It does.
Read a bunch of cases.
Yeah.
They talked about the use of the property. You know, how was the property being used? So, you know, as I said, this is our basic fact pattern, and I'm just letting you know. Don't worry too much about that part right here, because that's actually will be key when we talk about case law. Not the first discussion, but later, because it's one of the, when you read all the cases that I've pulled that go with this, there are some interesting discussions on the reason those facts were put in there.
Yes, you're totally right. I'm forgetting, and now I'm remembering, because that is going to be important. But at any rate, and the city walkways and stuff. So, but they've posted a policy.
It's so well written. It's because James wrote this fact there.
Yeah, of not allowing solicitations or proselytizing on its property. That's like, you know, asking for donations or religious proselytizing. The policy is applied nationally to all the stores. Easy Mart believes it's critical for its business that customers not be subject to sales or political matters when coming to shop. Managers at Easy Mart are instructed to call the police when people on the property try to sell things or get petition signatures. The Ross Easy Mart manager has allowed the Boy Scouts and the Salvation Army to stand outside the store seasonally. Sarah set up a table outside the entrance of Easy Mart with a sign stating Easy Mart engages in unfair labor practices. She would talk to people about her experience and would ask them to consider their choice of shopping at Easy Mart given her story. She did not block or physically prevent shoppers from coming or going to the store. She was cordial and never raised her voice or leveled accusations at customers. Easy Mart asked Sarah to leave the premises. She said she would not do so because she said she had a right under the California Constitution to free speech, even on private property. Easy Mart called the police. Upon the police arriving and threatening her with arrest, Sarah left the property. She thinks her right to free speech has been violated. Is she right? So clearly, you know, you're going to have at least one cause of action for a free, you know, a violation of free speech. So knowing that, right, you want to look, what's the timeline? Like, how long does she have to file that? And Rick, tell me if you're thinking this too, but could students imagine other causes of action? Like, might there be other things here that if they wanted to, but for sure, yeah, for sure, it's at least the free speech issue. What's the timeline on that? Like, do you have 30 years to bring a case? You know, 3 months, you know, what is it? So let's see here. I see there's been discussion too about, so you're right, murder as a penal code does not have has an unlimited statute of limitation. Sexual assault in California, I want to say it's like off the top of my head. Hun, do you know what sexual assault statute of limitations is for penal code? Off the top of your head?
It used to be 3 years, but it changed.
No, it's unlimited, isn't it? Didn't
It
they just
used to
pass
be
that bill?
it used to be 3 years, but it just changed. What is it now? Is it unlimited?
It was like 10 years from the date of reporting.
Okay, my phone a friend is saying he thinks it's 10 years from the date of reporting, but yeah, and some jurisdictions have gone unlimited, like Pennsylvania and New York. So you can really see that statute of limitations is very much a function of the legislature. They can change it. Like this isn't something that was chiseled into Mount Olympus, you know. And New York has done some stuff where it's going to go back to a slightly more restricted, but I think right now you can bring stuff from like 25, 30 years ago. So you've been seeing a bunch of cases filed that, you know, a year ago would have been outside the statute of limitations, but they've opened them up for a period. So, I mean, that could change. So they could make sexual assault unlimited. But yeah, and some of those famous cases. So at any rate, but we have to look it up, you guys. I don't know either. So Kevin may be right. Maybe I feel like it's not unlimited totally, but maybe. Anyway, but so for this, you guys are just focusing on her free speech claim, right? So, but does that help you guys? So we're going to be playing with this fact pattern for all of our research as we go, and just focusing on different elements, right, to do research.
Well, thinking along the free speech line, what type of action would that be? Would it be a breach of contract? Anybody?
Motion detected.
Yeah, tort.
A tort. I'd be looking at torts. I'd look specifically to say if they say anything about free speech, but if not, then you'd be looking at your general tort statutes. You know, when the police came and moved her, you know, made her leave, is that, you know, is it possible that it might be a false arrest type scenario? And again, that's a tort. What else would we have in here? I had one in my head a minute ago and it just left my head. Yeah, so think broadly, you know, not too narrowly, but we're probably looking at general tort actions. You want to make sure there's not anything specific on free speech. She would have been the one trespassing, so that wouldn't be her cause of action, but it would be for Easy Mart.
And their Easy Mart isn't a government, you know, they're a private company. Right. But you're right. When they call the police, you know, does that transform it? Does that change it to, I mean, I don't know. But yeah, so interesting, you know. And these things are designed that there's kind of twists and turns. But that's why you guys can do the discussion board. Like you can put these ideas out there and help each other, you know.
So my question is, so we're basically the legal team for Quinn in this scenario, this assignment here.
Today, yes.
Not, okay, just today, okay. Not the entire.
No. We will be taking different aspects of it as we go along. Never know, we might represent the Boy Scouts. Oh no, they went bankrupt, so. Yeah. Any questions? And remember, it's best to throw questions into the general class question discussion because I am subscribed to that. I don't subscribe to your discussion, though I pop in and out of it. So if you have a question, and remember, if it's a general class question, you want to ask it in our class question discussion because that way everybody gets the benefit of it. It's like you asked it here. The only time I want to get emails is if it's regarding a grade or you have a personal issue, you know, that has created in these uncertain times, something's come up that's you would like a little leeway or something because of that, or, you know, you want to explain something. That's more than welcome to take those emails. But if you want to know, I can't find this assignment, or you said there was that link to the California book, where is that? And one of the things you're going to find is, if you notice in the chat over here, students will answer you sometimes quicker than I catch the fact that I have one there. So Ask your questions in the general class questions as opposed to, I do go through, but sometimes I don't see them for a couple days in the discussions because I'm going through discussions in 7 different classes this semester. So ask them in the general class question. Okay.
I just have one last cute video to share when we're done recording. So if you guys have other questions or anything else, because I'll stop the recording. Or are you guys feeling okay? So your first posts are due Wednesday. So you've got a couple days, and there's a hip hop class going on next to me here. Sorry, guys. Hip hop on Zoom, you know what I mean? But so your first posts are due Wednesday, and then your comments are due by Sunday. So any other questions or anything? I'll stop the recording.